The cop's shoulders were shaking. He was trying, really trying to look professional, but his eyes kept flicking up to the two giant, jiggling pupils on my second floor. "So, sir," he choked out, "let me get this straight. You did this because your cat—" But I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with the cops. It didn't even start with the contractors, or the scaffolding, or the invoice for 2 custom ocular enhancements. It started, as all suburban apocalypses do, on a perfectly normal Tuesday. And with a letter. No, wait. That's not right. The letter came later. It started before that. It started with the sound. The click-clack. Let me set the scene. It's 9:30 a.m. I'm in my home office, which is just a fancy name for the guest bedroom that smells faintly of old curtains. I'm a graphic designer, which is a fancy name for a guy who spends 8 hours a day arguing with clients over which shade of beige pops the most. My current project was a logo for a synergy-based, holistic solutions startup. Their main feedback was, can we make the font look faster? This is my life. And I love it. I love the quiet. I love the low, distant hum of some neighbor's lawnmower, the unofficial anthem of the American suburbs. I love the satisfying thwack of my coffee mug on its cork coaster. I'm Mark. I'm 30-something, and my social battery, on a good day, maxes out at about 5%. My personal heaven is a canceled plan and a new documentary on streaming. And I have a roommate. His name is Loki. Loki is a 10-pound, slightly overweight orange cat. He's not a support animal. He's a moral ambiguity animal. His primary function is to convert sunlight, kibble, and my general affection into vast tumbleweed-sized clumps of fur on my dark-colored sofa. His one and only hobby, his life's passion, is sitting in the front picture window. He doesn't do much. He just sits. He watches the world go by. A leaf falls. He's riveted. A mail truck passes. It's high drama. He's the furry, silent sentinel of 1428 Maple Drive. On this particular Tuesday, the Synergy logo was finally fast enough. The coffee was hitting just right, and Loki was at his post, bathing in a sunbeam, staring placidly at the street. All was right with the world. Then I saw her. I didn't know her name yet, not really. To me, she was just the shadow of the HOA, the lawn whisperer, the mailbox inspector. She lived in the immaculate beige colonial across the street, the one where the flowers all seemed to bloom in terror, at perfect 90-degree angles. I'd watched her, from this very window, measure her own blades of grass with a ruler. I'd seen her use a level on her neighbor's newly installed garden gnome. She was a woman who had, apparently, defeated all the real problems in her life and had moved on to the theoretical ones. And on this Tuesday, she was not in her yard. She was walking. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. The sound of sensible yet authoritative shoes on pavement. And they were getting closer. Click, clack, click, clack. Stop! The sound ceased. Right at the end of my driveway, I leaned forward in my chair. Loki didn't move. He just stared. She was looking at my window. No, not at me. At him. I watched, frozen, as she marched up my walkway. She didn't text. She didn't call. She didn't email the HOA's concerns inbox. She rang the doorbell. It felt like an act of war. I padded downstairs, my socks slipping on the hardwood. I opened the door. She was in full form. Visor, khaki shorts, a polo shirt with a tiny, meaningless crest on it. Her arms were crossed so tightly it looked like a medical condition. "Mark." She said my name like it was a diagnosis. "Brenda," I replied. I only knew her name because she'd signed the last HOA newsletter about unapproved holiday decorations, which, for the record, was a single pumpkin in November. "What's up? Everything okay with the acceptable shades of beige?" She didn't smile. I don't think the muscles in her face knew how. She just lifted one single accusatory finger and pointed it past me, toward the picture window. "It's about that." I turned. Loki was still there. He hadn't moved. He was just a cat in a window. "Loki?" I said. "My cat?" She took a deep breath, like she was about to reveal a terrible secret. "It's staring." I waited. Surely there was a follow-up, a part 2, a therefore. There was not. My brain was buffering. I was trying to download the rest of the sentence. "It's staring, and what? It's staring and it's plotting to overthrow the local government? It's staring and it's using X-ray vision to steal your bank codes?" Is she... what? I thought. Is this a bit? Am I on a show? "Brenda," I said slowly, trying to assemble the words in the correct, non-insulting order. "He's a cat. Staring is 70% of his job. The other 30% is sleeping, and, pooping on my dime." Her face did not budge. "It's unnerving, Mark. It's aggressive. My guests have commented. It's a constant penetrating gaze. It's making my azaleas wilt. You need to handle it." The azaleas. Her azaleas. Across the street. The cat's gaze was wilting her flowers from 50 yards away. Handle what?" I asked, my voice cracking a little. "The staring? You want me to, I don't know, buy him tiny little cat sunglasses?" "The situation. Handle it." And with that, she turned. She didn't say goodbye. She just click-clacked away. A one-woman army of suburban tyranny marching back to her perfectly manicured beige fortress. I stood in the open doorway for a full minute. I looked at Loki. He looked at me. He blinked. Once. Slowly. Did you just wilt her azaleas?" I whispered. He just stared. For the next 48 hours, I tried. I really did. I tried to handle the situation. I was a reasonable, law-abiding, beige logo-designing member of society. If a neighbor has a problem, you try to fix it. Even if the problem sounds like a symptom of a low-grade psychotic break. My first attempt was diplomacy. Attempt 1. The talk. I sat down on the floor in front of the window. Loki was in his usual spot, sphinx-like, absorbing photons. "Okay, buddy," I said, rubbing his head. He purred, a sound like a tiny broken motor. "We need to talk. That lady, across the street? Yeah, her. Brenda. She thinks you're staring at her." Loki turned his head and gave me the slow blink. Cat for "I love you," or possibly "You are a large, warm tree who provides food." I know. You're a cat. It's what you do. But she's got a visor, man. She's not messing around. She said you're wilting her azaleas. Her azaleas, Loki. Loki stood up, stretched, put his tail in my face, and then promptly sat back down in the exact same spot, resuming his exact same stare. "Okay," I said. "So you're not open to reason. New rule. You can't look out the window anymore. Brenda's azaleas are wilting." "Yes, I know. Just try staring at the couch. The couch doesn't have an HOA lawyer. Look, the wall. The wall is fascinating. It's eggshell, I think. Very stimulating." I picked him up and moved him to the sofa. He gave me a look of profound betrayal, as if I had just informed him his kibble was now 2% less savory. He waited until I turned my back, and then, with a soft thump, he was back in the window. Staring. Okay. Failed. Time for escalation. Attempt 2. The curtain. I had sheer curtains on the picture window. They were mostly for show. I never closed them. This is it, I thought. This is the good faith effort. I'll just obstruct the view. I walked over and pulled the sheer white curtain closed. "There," I said to the empty room. "Problem solved. He can't stare out. She can't stare in. It's a win-win." The house was quieter, a little darker. I went back to my office, feeling smug. I had handled it. I had compromised. I was a good neighbor. I spent the next hour working on a pamphlet for a dental office that wanted something toothy, but not too toothy. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The text was just a photo. It was a picture of my house, taken from the street, taken from Brenda's lawn. Loki, seeing his view mildly inconvenienced by the sheer fabric, had simply pushed his entire face against it. The result was horrifying. It was no longer a cat. It was a ghoulish, Lovecraftian death mask. His features were smashed and distorted by the fabric. His whiskers were bent at weird angles. His eyes were huge, disembodied orbs. He looked like a furry ghost trapped in the spectral plane, his mouth open in a silent, fuzzy scream. He looked like the Shroud of Turin if Jesus had been an orange tabby. A second text came through. "This is not better. This is hostile." She was right. It was somehow 1,000 times worse. It was pure, unfiltered, 100-proof nightmare fuel. I ran downstairs and yanked the curtain back open. Loki looked at me, annoyed at the interruption, and then settled back into his normal, non-fabric distorted stare. Attempt 3. The repositioning. I was getting desperate. This was my last-ditch effort. "It's not him," I reasoned. "It's the location. He needs a new window." I went online. I dropped $200 on a massive, carpeted, multi-level cat tree. The kind of thing you see in a 90s sitcom apartment. It had scratching posts, a little hidey hole, and a plush platform at the very top. I assembled it, sweating and cursing the tiny Allen key, and placed it next to a side window. A window that faced my other neighbor, Dave, a perfectly normal dude who just grilled and listened to classic rock. Dave didn't care about staring. "Look, Loki," I said, lifting him and placing him on the plush perch. "A new kingdom, a new vista. Look, you can see Dave's recycling bins. Fascinating, right?" Loki stared at me with profound disappointment. He looked at the window. He looked at me. He looked at the $200 cat tree. He then hopped down, walked back into the living room, and, ignoring his new, expensive throne, simply hopped onto the back of the sofa. This gave him a slightly higher, more authoritative vantage point from the exact same front window. He was no longer just staring. He was judging. From on high. I gave up. I was beaten. What else could I do? Blindfold the cat? Put him in a tiny kitty prison? I had tried. I had failed. Surely she would see the absurdity. Surely she would just let it go. That Friday, the letter arrived. It was in my mailbox, in a crisp, beige envelope. The HOA logo was embossed in the corner. It wasn't a friendly note. It wasn't a "let's talk." It was official. "Dear resident of 1428 Maple Drive," it began. "It has come to the attention of the board that your residence is in violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, Section 8.4, nuisances and annoyances, specifically the unrelenting aggressive gaze and constant visual harassment perpetrated by your pet." They'd put "pet" in quotes, like he was a secret agent, like he was Agent Loki. "The board has received multiple complaints from neighbors who feel watched, intimidated, and unable to enjoy their property due to this ongoing situation. Your previous attempts at rectification, specifically the curtain incident, have been deemed provocative and insufficient." The curtain incident. "As of this date, a fine of $50 will be levied against your property for every day the situation is not fully and completely rectified. You have 7 days to appeal, though. Given the visual evidence, the board does not recommend it." It was signed, "The Architectural Review Committee," with Brenda's name scribbled underneath as President. $50. A day. For staring. I did the math. That was $1,500 a month. That was $18,000 a year. At this rate, Loki's staring. Habit was going to cost more than my Netflix subscription, my car insurance, and my grocery bill combined. I looked at the letter. I looked at Brenda's house. I looked at Loki, who was now peacefully asleep in the sunbeam, oblivious to the fact that his face was now a major financial liability. "Okay," I said to the quiet house. "Okay." This was war. The next 2 days were a blur of stewing. I was pacing. I was muttering to myself. I was explaining in great detail the legal and financial ramifications of the situation to Loki, who just stared. "They're fining us, man," I said, gesturing wildly with the letter. $50 a day for your face. What do they want me to do? What does she want?" Loki, in response, began to lick his own leg. He was not apparently concerned with the complex geopolitics of the neighborhood. I was stuck. I was in a Karen Cohen, a paradox of suburban misery. I couldn't board up the window. The HOA would fine me for that, too. I couldn't get rid of Loki. He was my furry, useless son. I couldn't force him to stop being a cat. I was trapped by a rule that was, by its very nature, insane. "What does she want?" I muttered again, staring out the window at her house. "She's complaining about staring. My cat is staring. It's the staring she hates. She just wants the staring to stop. But she's fixated on the staring. The problem is the staring." My brain was running in a loop. I was getting nowhere. I designed a logo for a dog-walking service that wanted a more professional paw print. I ate a sad, microwaved dinner. I tried to watch a documentary, but I couldn't focus. I went to bed. I couldn't sleep. It was 4:00 a.m., the hour of the wolf, or in my case, the hour of the "why did I eat that entire bag of chips?" I was doing what every modern, well-adjusted adult does when faced with an existential crisis. I was doom-scrolling on my phone. I scrolled past an article about the economy. I scrolled past my high school friend's third baby. I scrolled past an ad for pants that apparently would change my life. And then I saw it. It wasn't even a good ad. It was a targeted pop-up for a craft store. Spring sale! Get your DIY on! It showed a picture of a kid's art project. It was a paper plate, painted blue, with some glitter on it, and two big, plastic, googly eyes. I stopped scrolling. My finger hovered over the screen. A tiny, stupid, paper plate and glitter idea. And then, the idea grew. It wasn't a tiny idea anymore. It was a big idea. A very big idea. A slow smile spread across my face, the kind of smile you see on a movie villain right before he reveals the giant laser. She complained my cat was staring. I whispered to the dark room. She never said my house couldn't. I sat up. The doom scroll was over. The research had begun. I wasn't thinking small. I wasn't thinking 3-inch craft eyes from the local hobby shop. Oh no. Brenda had escalated this past the hobby shop level. She had brought fines into it. She had brought lawyers and architectural review committees. I was bringing art. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Extra large googly eyes. Giant googly eyes. Googly eyes for cars. The results were interesting, but not big enough. I went deeper. Parade float supplies. Industrial novelty props. Custom oversized prop manufacturing. And then I found it. A specialty website based out of Wisconsin. http www.google.com. Search qparadefloatsupplies.com. They sold everything. Faux brick paneling, chicken wire, tinsel, and under novelty enhancements, there it was. 3 foot wide, all-weather, jiggle action googly eyes. Pair. Jiggle action. They were designed to be bolted onto the front of a Shriner's comedy car or a high school homecoming float. They were made of thick, durable, UV-resistant plastic. They were perfect. I looked at my house on Google Street View, the 2 second-story windows, my office window, and the master bedroom window. They were symmetrical. They were roundish. They were, for all intents and purposes, eyes. My house had a face. It just needed accessorizing. I clicked Add to Cart. I paid for expedited shipping. This was no longer about the cat. This was no longer about the fine. This was about art. This was about malicious compliance. This was about making a statement. A very large, very wobbly statement. The eyes arrived 3 days later, in a box the size of a refrigerator. The delivery guy looked at me, at the label, and back at me. I just smiled and said, "It's for a big school project." He just nodded, clearly not paid enough to question the rapidly declining sanity of the suburbs. I dragged the box into my garage. I opened it. They were majestic. They were bigger than I'd imagined. The pupils were the size of dinner plates, and they were loose inside the clear plastic dome. I picked one up and gave it a little shake. The pupil wobbled. Wobble, wobble. It was the most beautiful, idiotic sound I'd ever heard. Now came the problem. I'm a graphic designer. I can use a mouse. I cannot use a 20-foot ladder and a power drill. I was going to hurt myself, void my homeowner's insurance, and probably drop one of these things on Dave's, the normal neighbor's, prize-winning hydrangeas. I needed a professional. I Googled siding installers near me. I found a local company. Sal's Siding and Window. Their slogan was, "We'll get it done." vague, promising. I made the call. It was awkward. Hi, Sal's siding? Yeah, this is Sal. Great, hi, I have a job. I need 2 custom window appliques installed on my 2nd floor. A beat of silence. Apply what? Appliques. They're decorative. It's a custom job. Can you come out and give me an estimate? Sal sighed. It was the sigh of a man who has seen every possible homeowner-inflicted tragedy. Yeah, sure. Tomorrow at 10. Sal himself showed up. He was exactly as I'd pictured. He had a clipboard, a tape measure on his belt, and the weary, sun-beaten face of a man who had spent 40 years arguing with people about vinyl siding. All right, he said, not bothering with a hello. Where's the problem? Siding loose? Window leak? No, I said. It's an install. A new install. The appliques. They're in the garage. Sal followed me into the garage. He stopped dead. I had leaned them against the wall, the 2 massive, 3-foot-wide, perfectly round, monumentally stupid, googly eyes. The pupils jiggled slightly as the garage door rumbled shut. This is the moment. The first audience. Sal just stopped. He looked at the eyes. He looked at me. He looked back at the eyes. He put his clipboard down. He slowly walked across the street to my front yard, craning his neck up at the 2 second-story windows. Then he looked across the street at Brenda's house. She was, of course, watching from her window, pretending to water a plant. Sal walked back into the garage. He looked at me. He looked at the eyes. He didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. It felt like an hour. Then, very slowly, he asked the only question that mattered. HOA? I nodded. Solemnly. HOA. A slow smile crept onto Sal's face. It was like watching a glacier crack. It was beautiful. He tapped one of the giant plastic eyes with his pen. She complain about your cat. My jaw dropped. How did you know? Sal let out a single, sharp laugh. A bark. Lady across the street. Brenda. Yeah, I know Brenda. She tried to fine my crew last year 'cause our truck was a non-approved shade of commercial white. Said it was disturbing the neighborhood's visual peace. I told her I'd be happy to paint it beige if she paid for it. He was in. He wasn't just in. He was an accomplice. She said my cat was staring, I said, the dam of my frustration finally breaking. She said he was wilting her azaleas and fining me $50 a day. Sal was nodding. He wasn't a contractor anymore. He was my general. He was my ride or die. All right, he said, picking up his clipboard. His entire demeanor had changed. He was energized. He was on a mission. All right, we can do this. You just use the adhesive backing these things came with. They'll fall off in the first storm. They'll probably take the siding with them. You want this done right? We gotta anchor them. I'm talking toggle bolts, straight into the siding. We'll seal the holes with silicone. They'll be watertight. Sal, I said, I want these things to survive a hurricane. I want them to be visible from space. I want them to jiggle every time a truck drives by. It's gonna void your siding warranty, he warned, a twinkle in his eye. Freedom isn't free, Sal. He grinned. No, it ain't. He started scribbling on his clipboard. We'll need the big ladder, maybe the scaffolding to get the angle right. I'll need 2 guys. We can do it Thursday. It'll be $800, cash. It's a bargain, I said. He ripped the paper off the clipboard and handed me the invoice. He'd written, Installation of 2 custom ocular enhancements. Sal, I said, shaking his hand, you're a patriot. Nah, he said, walking to his truck. I just really hate HOAs, and that truck is a perfectly fine shade of white. Thursday morning, 8:00 a.m. It was on. It wasn't just Sal and a ladder. It was Sal's siding and window. The A-team. A full crew. 2 trucks. They pulled up and began unloading scaffolding. Metal scaffolding. The kind you see on a real construction site. The noise of clanging metal poles echoed through the quiet suburban morning like a declaration of war. It was beautiful. I was in my office, peeking through the blinds. Loki was at my feet, confused by the noise. Within 30 minutes, the audience had gathered. Dave, my normal neighbor, was on his porch with a cup of coffee, looking utterly baffled. The family 3 doors down had stopped their minivan in the middle of the street. And then, there was Brenda. She was on her lawn, arms crossed, visor on. She was fuming. She was marching back and forth on her perfect ruler-cut grass, like a tiny general whose supply lines had been cut. The scaffolding was up. Sal and his youngest crew member, a kid who looked about 19, were climbing up. They had drills. They had caulk guns. This was happening. Brenda couldn't take it anymore. She marched across the street. "What is this?" she shouted up at Sal. "What are you doing? You can't modify the exterior. I'm on the Architectural Review Committee. This is not an approved alteration." Sal, 20 feet in the air, didn't miss a beat. He leaned over the scaffolding. "Ma'am," he shouted down, "we're just, enhancing thermal properties of the windows. It's eco-friendly, reflects the sun." That's not, those aren't thermal. What are those?" she sputtered. Sal just turned back to his crew. "All right, send up the first unit." The kid on the ground grabbed the first giant eye. He tied a rope to it. They hoisted it up, hand over hand, like they were raising a flag at Iwo Jima. It was majestic. Sal and his guy held it up against the siding, right over the master bedroom window. They stepped back, squinted. Sal yelled, "Half an inch to the left." They shifted it. "Perfect!" The zzzt of the power drill cut through the air. Thunk. The first bolt went in. Zzzt. Thunk. The second. They secured it. The first eye was in place. It was glorious. It was so much better than I'd even imagined. Brenda was making a sound like a tea kettle reaching a full, shrieking boil. This is a violation. I am fining you. I'm fining him." Sal ignored her. "Second unit." They hoisted the second eye. They lined it up over my office window. Zt, thunk. Thunk. It was done. My house was alive. It was no longer a boring beige colonial. It was a giant, surprised, slightly unhinged face. The crew on the ground started to snicker. Dave, across the street, let out a loud, "Ha!" And then came the magic. The 19-year-old kid on the ground, with a grin that was pure, uncut teenage chaos, walked over to the siding. He looked up at Sal. Sal gave him a curt, professional nod. The kid pulled back his hand and flicked the vinyl siding. Thwack. The 2 giant pupils jiggled, wobble. They didn't jiggle in unison. They jiggled independently. One wobbled left, the other wobbled down and to the right. It looked perfectly deranged. The silence that followed was shattered. The minivan family burst into laughter. Dave was doubled over, slapping his knee. A guy I'd never even seen before, jogging by, just stopped, pointed, and yelled, "Yes! Yes!" Brenda's face went from a furious, blotchy red to a pale, trembling, chalky white. She was vibrating. She was sputtering. This is, I'm calling the police! This is harassment! This is indecent!" She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking with rage. That was my cue. I walked calmly downstairs. I picked up Loki. I opened my front door and walked out onto the porch, cradling my cat like a Bond villain. I looked across the lawn at Brenda, who was screaming into her phone about a public disturbance. I smiled. I gave her a serene, neighborly little wave. Loki stared. It took about 15 minutes. A single police cruiser, a Ford Explorer, pulled up. No sirens, no flashing lights, just a quiet, "What is this fresh hell now?" arrival. 2 officers got out. One was Officer Miller, a man in his late 50s who looked like he had been one day from retirement for the last 10 years. He had a magnificent mustache, and he wore the profound, bone-deep weariness of a man who has seen every stupid thing one human can do to another. His partner was Officer Ramirez, a rookie, young, and crucially trying very, very hard not to laugh. Brenda, seeing her authority-based backup, practically sprinted to the car. "Officer, thank God!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at my house. He's mocking me. He's built a face. It's harassment. It's public indecency. Look at it. It's jiggling." Officer Miller sighed. It was a sigh that came from his very soul. It was a sigh that said, "I could have been a fisherman." He put a hand up. "Ma'am, please step back from the vehicle. Let me talk to the homeowner." He and Ramirez walked up my driveway. Sal and his crew were pointedly and very slowly packing up their tools, enjoying the show. I was still on the porch, holding Loki. Miller stopped at the bottom of my steps. He looked at me. He looked at Loki. He looked up at the 2 giant, 3-foot-wide googly eyes, which, as if on cue, wobbled in the morning breeze. Ramirez coughed, a sound that was suspiciously like a snort, and quickly turned away, pretending to examine a shrub. This was it. We were back to the beginning, officer. Miller looked up at the house, then back at me. His shoulders were shaking. He was trying. He was trying so hard. "So, sir," he choked out, "let me get this straight. You did this because your cat was staring?" I put on my most sincere, most reasonable, most I am a logic-based life form face. "Officer," I said, "with all due respect, my house isn't breaking any laws. It's just expressive. It's artistic expression, see? I'm a designer. It's a statement. It's about the pervasive surveillance state in modern suburbia. The eyes, they represent the gaze of the community." Ramirez made a small, squeaking sound and walked further away, now intensely interested in my gutter. "The gaze," Miller repeated, his mustache twitching. "And besides," I continued, playing my trump card, "she started it. She complained my cat was staring. She's the president of the HOA. I received an official letter. I was fined, officer. I was just trying to be compliant. She never specified what couldn't stare. I simply handled the situation, as requested. I redirected the gaze upwards, away from her azaleas." Miller looked at me. He looked at Brenda, who was vibrating on the sidewalk. He looked back at the house. The eyes wobbled. Wobble, wobble. Ramirez was now fully turned around, his back to all of us, his shoulders bouncing. Miller pinched the bridge of his nose. He was, I sensed, holding on to the last frayed thread of his sanity. "Brenda," he called over, his voice tired. "Ma'am, is the house making noise?" It's jiggling, she shrieked. Ma'am, jiggling is not a crime. It's indecent. Ma'am, it's 2 circles. It's plastic. It's no more indecent than a beach ball. But, it's looking at me. Miller took a deep breath. Ma'am, is it actually staring at you? Does it have cameras? Is it recording you? No, sir, I piped up helpfully. No cameras. Just 100% American-made, UV-resistant plastic. Eco-friendly, even. Reflects the sun. Sal, packing his truck, gave me a thumbs up. Officer Miller put his hands on his hips. He looked at Brenda. Ma'am, this is the stupidest thing I have ever seen, and I once had to arrest a man who was trying to barter a live raccoon for beer. This is an HOA matter. It's a civil issue. It is not a police matter. Please, for the love of God, stop calling 911. But, have a good day, ma'am. Sir, he said, nodding to me. He didn't smile, but his mustache was definitely crooked. Sir, nice art. He and Ramirez got back in the cruiser. As they pulled away, I could see them both, silhouettes in the car, just shaking with laughter. The cops were gone. Sal and his crew were gone. The neighbors were gone. It was just me, Loki, and Brenda. She was left on the sidewalk, utterly defeated. She looked at me. She looked at the house. The eyes. Wobble, wobble. She made a sound like a deflating balloon, turned, and click-clacked back to her beige fortress. The aftermath was immediate. My house was, for lack of a better word, famous. By that evening, the local high school kids had found it. There was a constant slow crawl of cars driving by. People were taking selfies on my lawn. My house was on Instagram, on TikTok. I was the Googly Eye house. I was the staring house. The best part? People were leaving gifts. A bag of Googly Eyes was taped to my mailbox. Someone left a bag of cat treats for Loki. A few days later, a local news van parked out front for 5 minutes, filmed the house, and drove off. The HOA, as you can imagine, was apoplectic. A week later, a new letter arrived. This one was delivered by certified mail. Final warning, it blared. You are in violation of, and then it just listed like 15 different rules. Unapproved structural alterations. Modification to exterior facade. Creating a public nuisance. Non-conforming aesthetic. The fine was no longer $50. It was $5,000. Payable immediately. The eyes must be removed within 24 hours and the siding repaired at your expense, or the board will pursue further legal action. They were playing hardball, but they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten my ally. They had forgotten Sal. I called him. I read him the letter. He just laughed. Non-conforming aesthetic? That's what they're going with? Okay, hold on. I got an idea. Those bylaws are online, right? 2 hours later, Sal was at my house with a letter. His own letter. On Sal's siding and window, letterhead. He'd also attached a new itemized invoice. I drove to the HOA's little drop box and put it in. The letter was a work of art. Dear Architectural Review Committee, it read. Per your final warning regarding 1428 Maple Drive, I am writing as the registered contractor for the project. The installation was not, as you claim, a structural alteration. As you can see from the attached revised invoice, the items installed are 2 custom, large format, all-weather, seasonal holiday decorations. Sal had found a loophole. A glorious, beautiful loophole. According to Section 12.9 of your own bylaws, he continued, residents are permitted to display seasonal and/or holiday-themed decorations for a period of up to 60 days without committee pre-approval. As these ocular enhancements are clearly a whimsical, non-denominational spring decoration, celebrating the awakening of the season, they fall well within these guidelines. Please note, the homeowner intends to remove them fully in compliance, no later than 60 days from their installation date. It was checkmate. The HOA was furious. They were stuck. Their own ridiculous ironclad rules were the very things protecting me. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't fine me. They couldn't sue me, not for 60 days anyway. And I knew, and they knew, that in 60 days I'd just take them down for 24 hours and put them back up as summer solstice decorations. The new normal set in. The traffic slowed down. The neighborhood accepted it. My house just had eyes now. I'm sitting at my desk right now, finishing this. The Synergy logo is finally done. It's 4:00 p.m. I looked out my window. Not the window, but through the giant, wobbly pupil that covers it. I saw Brenda pull out of her driveway. She stopped, as she always does. She looked at my house. The eyes, catching a cross breeze, gave a gentle wobble. She just shook her head and drove away. I looked down. Loki had hopped onto my desk. He was sitting on my keyboard, purring. He was staring. I reached over and scratched his ears. "Good job, buddy," I said. "We handled it."